What are some discourse and linguistic characteristics of STEM text? This is Dr. Selawi, and this is based on the book Teaching ESL and STEM Content Through Call. So in this brief presentation, I'd like to discuss this topic and share with you some examples and techniques and concepts that need to be included when we do a discourse analysis. All right. So why bother? Why are we supposed to do this discourse analysis and linguistic analysis to STEM text? Well, according to research, and I have cited some for you here, the discourse analysis makes the comprehension, processing, and learning much easier for students. So once you, as a teacher, present Bahtia, for example, 1993, he talks about the concept of isification of text. And the genre of text that we are dealing with, which is STEM, once you put it in a visual for your students and understand the type of discourse that you are dealing with, that comprehension process will be easier and the learning is going to be faster. So related to this analysis is a key concept which is called register. It refers to the different ways people draw on linguistic and non-linguistic sources as they engage in different kinds of activities with different kinds of people through different modes of communication. So we use language to achieve certain purposes, and we have a repertoire of discourse patterns that we select from to achieve that communicative act. So if we are telling a story, we will use the story grammar or the story discourse to achieve that purpose. So in our case, we are dealing with STEM, so we will be focusing on STEM. Register often refers to the degree of formality of language. So for example, the language used in a formal setting, as in schools, as opposed to the language used at home or in the street. So the format is different, the type of language we use is different. So in a more general sense, it means the language used by a group of people who share similar work or interests, such as doctors, engineers, teachers, lawyers, and so on and so forth. The vocabulary related to such profession is referred to as jargon. So that's the terminology, the lexicon, technical lexicon that is related to that profession, for example. Some key concepts when it comes to this type of activity, which is discourse analysis and linguistic analysis. We need to understand the difference between functions and structures in language. So language functions are the purposes for which we use language to communicate. All right, we use language to achieve certain communicative acts in our daily life. And we use it for a variety of formal and informal purposes. So specific grammatical structures and vocabulary are used to express each language function. So you can refer to some examples on this on pages 23, 24 in Selawi 2018. And let me move on to some more concrete examples here. So for example, as illustrated in the book, the curriculum in a given STEM content area focuses on the concepts of comparing and contrasting living and non-living things, for example. So to run a linguistic analysis, we can make a list of structures and vocabulary that express such concept or function. So in our case, the function here is comparing and contrasting. So we know our function. Now we go to the structures. So in our case, again, comparatives can be used in this case with adjective plus er, or less slash more plus adjective. So you say things like bigger, less expensive, more expensive than plus adjective. So that's your structure. Or you can say as expensive as plus adjective plus as. We can also make use of superlatives in that case. All right, so vocabulary in our analysis will include different adjectives and modifiers and so on and so forth. As far as grammar goes, if we are only focusing on simple present tense, simple present structure, you need to look at the text and see what kind of sentence structure are we dealing with. All right. Now, science-related language functions include asking questions for science and defining problems for engineering, for example, developing and using models, planning and clarifying out investigations, analyzing and interpreting data, using mathematics and computational thinking, constructing explanations for science and developing designs for engineering in that example, for example. Engaging in arguments for evidence and providing evidence based text to support your argument or point or hypothesis, and obtaining and evaluating communicating information. Scientific words and phrases. Everyday words have scientific specific meanings that are different from one everyday use or meaning. So everyday words have science-specific meanings that are different from their everyday use or meaning. For example, words like cell, space, table, energy, force. These words change meaning depending on the genre of text and the register that they have been used in that situation. So, other challenges lie in the fact that some discipline-specific terms created and defined within a specific scientific use, such as biome, proton, gene, and so on and so forth. So, the words, they change meaning from one even STEM area to another. So a function in math is different from the meaning of the word function in, let's say, biology or any other STEM content. Some characteristics and types of STEM-related discourse. And again, by the way, all of this is in your in the book, CLIW 2018. If you go to that chapter 3, and throughout the book, it uses a genre-based analysis and discourse-based analysis throughout, because in your lesson planning, you are also required to do some curriculum and linguistic analysis, which is kind of related to what we are talking about here. Okay, so characteristics and types of STEM-related discourse. It could be the function of the discourse in this case could be a description, okay, description discourse format, or a sequence discourse format, or cause-effect discourse format, comparing and contrasting discourse format, or problem solving or problem solution discourse format. So these are different examples of some of the STEM-related discourse formats that you will be encountering in your STEM texts. All right, the next slide will show you a graphic organizer. Graphic organizers are key to simplifying and helping learners to comprehend and process the discourse of the STEM content that they are dealing with. All right, so you have from description, you see that web, the first one over here, and then you have the compare and contrast. You could also use a Venn diagram, problem solution, sequencing, cause effect, and so on and so forth. And these are some signal words or phrases for each of these types of discourses. So for description, you have, for example, characteristics you have, for instance, such as, these are expressions that are related to this function. So as we did, for example, in that comparing and contrasting earlier, so it's the same thing. And here is comparing and contrasting again. So you have, however, nevertheless, on the other hand. These are logical connectors that serve as cohesive devices in your discourse and allow you to build that compare and contrast discourse in this case. All right, these are things to watch for in your analysis. So a discourse analysis of the language of science reveals that the genre of text presents some unique characteristics, which include authoritativeness, which is used to suppress human agents behind events, concepts, and discoveries, and to make the scientific discourse more objective or timeless. Through simple present tense, passive voice is used heavily, and generalized and virtual participants. So you have this research team members found, things of that nature. And then there are some hidden evaluations. It is found, it is claimed or confirmed, data results show, and so on and so forth. Expressions like those, they make that authoritativeness aspect of the discourse. Nominalization of verbs and adjectives into nouns to economically summarize sentences into one abstract noun phrase. So a sentence, for example, the sentence we must select techniques for efficiently becomes there is need for more efficient technique selection. Long and complex noun phrases and clauses, we refer to these as heavy noun phrases, to effectively pack complex content within shorter sentences. So you can see how complex these phrases are. So the thickened fibrous connective tissue is one phrase right there, okay? So it can be replaced by it as a subject pronoun here for you. So this is a phenomenon in linguistics and in syntax in English, and there is no limit on how heavy you can make that noun phrase. So you can talk about, for example, in normal daily language, you can say the girl sitting next to me with a black jacket is my friend. So notice how I made that noun phrase so heavy and so complex. And that's what throws off English language learners in general. So heavy noun phrases are an aspect or a characteristic of STEM discourse. Technical vocabulary is heavily used, and there is no need to emphasize that. It's a very clear characteristic of STEM. Here's a sample text, and that includes a description and cause and effect type of discourse. So you can see I have now in this text, what I did is I highlighted the keywords in black. I highlighted the passive voice in blue. So has traditionally been viewed is a passive voice. Their products are expressed, passive voice. System has been changed, another passive voice. The system is influenced by, passive voice. So, and then I marked the logical connectors in my text by saying in addition to. So this is a marker that helps us connect discourse. It's a cohesive device. And you also have, for example, as a phrase that is used to provide examples in descriptions, all right? And then you have this evidence suggests that tissue is your authoritative type of style of discourse. Evidence suggests, instead of saying I suggest or the researcher or the person who's doing the research, it is put into this style to sound more objective and more authoritative. Now notice that consequently here we have marked that as a connecting word because it ties the cause and effect. So this is the consequence of the previous statements. Consequently, the duration of action of the ACE inhibitor may be more dependent on the duration of tissue, blah, blah, blah. All right, so this is an example, and when you are doing your discourse and linguistic analysis, you need to highlight, illustrate, and list all these aspects in your paper, in your report. Okay, so you can use any coding you want basically to follow that. So now I gave another example of an if and then pattern of discourse in this slide. If two angles are adjacent, that's your hypothesis, then the angles share a vertex, a side, and no common interior points. That's your conclusion, what we call in discourse analysis, and in this case, in geometry, the hypothesis and the conclusion. So this statement is called a conditional statement in STEM. It is used in science, technology, engineering, and math, and the above example applies to geometry. So that's just in a nutshell, just quickly, briefly, an introduction to this concept of discourse analysis and linguistic analysis. And we will be talking more. I will be sharing a rubric for the projects that you are required to do for this class. Thank you so much and take care.